Alright. So, I made a tier list on the states of Red Dead 2, and I did make a few mistakes in terms of some of the areas and locations, because I was like going kind of barely along the borders and still made some mistakes. So, let's actually do a town tier list, because I think I'm significantly less likely to make mistakes here, and even though it says Red Dead 2 town tier list, I'm probably going to make some references to Red Dead 1 as well, because again, these towns do exist. Some of these towns do exist across the two games, so I feel like it's also prudent to kind of mention that. So let's actually jump in and talk about the towns. So, first one we have on the list here is Armadillo. Armadillo is an interesting place because it's actually dead in Red Dead 2, and in fact is not all that populated, but in Red Dead 1 is the first town hub that you kind of visit story-wise. And you do go through a lot of tutorials and things like that. It's a fairly basic, fairly small town, but you do visit it very frequently, especially in Red Dead 1. Well, I say especially, like, you can't really visit Armadillo at all until like the epilogue of Red Dead 2. So I think with all things considered, it's a small, cozy place, but also because it's in the middle of like a main street that goes down and like 4 connecting paths that you could go through to enter the town, either from the north or the south, it's kind of pH neutral in my opinion. It's sort of middle of the road. It's a fine town. Because the good stuff about it, small, but the bad stuff about it is that it's in the middle of town, and also bandits do come through every now and again, dragging someone behind them. And it just feels like a fairly standard town you would expect to see in sort of the old Western world, so to speak. Now, next we have is Blackwater. Blackwater is a larger town, significantly more populated, found in West Elizabeth, and West Elizabeth as a state is actually quite nice. A lot of greenery with the Great Plains, and then you've got stuff like tall trees. A nice place, all in all, in terms of the actual state itself. The town, on the other hand, has very little bearing on the story in Red Dead 2. Well, rather, I say very little bearing because you don't visit the town in Red Dead 2 until the epilogue. But the very beginning of the story does pretty much set off the events of the entire franchise at this point. Blackwater, on the other hand, in Red Dead 1, is a town that you visit pretty much at the end of the game. During the the last final-ish area of the game. And it's, again, another fine town. Just because it's larger doesn't make it better. It is off to the east of West Elizabeth. So what it has over Armadillo, I would argue, is the fact that you've got this water lake. You have this massive lake there. Sorry. I was going to say something else like a river, but I realized it's actually much bigger. It's a lake. And animals around the area are quite nice. But again, that's more so in relation to the wildlife and less so the town. I'm actually not a fan of the town, and again, I think that this is also quite mid as well. I think when I look at Armadillo and Blackwater, they're kind of on the same level in my opinion, because neither of those places are places that I personally would want to live because of bandits in Armadillo, or the fact that in Blackwater, it seems so easy to get caught by the police just because you're walking around. For some reason, there's like police everywhere, just for some reason. Next we have is the Van Horn Trading Post. Now, Van Horn is a small place. It looks kind of ruddy and broken down to some extent. I look at Van Horn and I think to myself, this is certainly not a place I would want to live. And the only reason why I would want to go through here is if I absolutely had to. Not a fan of the structures, the living quarters and stuff like that. I just don't really like it. So yeah, I'm really just not a fan of Van Horn at all. Then we have Annesberg. Now, or Annesberg. I've always pronounced it as Annesberg, but anyway, Annesberg is a also another town that kind of falls under where Van Horn does, because of the fact that it's largely, while it's off the coast, sure, and that's neat, it's largely for trains to come in, fill up their like what they need to fill up with, like whether it be a bunch of coal in trains and things like that, and then just go off, because it's a mining town at the end of the day. And I don't like the idea of mining towns, because again, when it comes to maps and locations, I very much like a lot of the nature that surrounds it. And while I am a fan of water-like locations in games, it doesn't change the fact that when it comes to Annesberg, that the mining aspect of the town just doesn't sit with me the right way. So I do consider that a bad town, just because it is a mining town and it hurts the nearby environment, because it makes the whole thing look a lot worse, both from a distance and from a closer view. That being said, however, Strawberry is next on the list, and I love Strawberry. It's a small town that is just located near some forests. It's got a river flowing through it. It's got a water wheel in the middle. All of the folks seem super nice, and doesn't really get hit too much with any sort of like, people don't really usually come stealing from Strawberry and stuff like that. Again, its smallness, it isn't necessarily among main roads or anything. There is a main road going through it, but there's only 2 places to enter or exit from. Outside of that, it's a fairly tuck it away in the corner type of town, and I absolutely love it. I think Strawberry is honestly my favorite town in the entire game. And I think it largely stems from its size, as well as the river flowing through it and the water wheel. Those alone make it a great town, in my opinion, and I absolutely love going through Strawberry each and every time. It's just like a Sunday drive on your horse, going through Strawberry each and every single time. Next we have is Rhodes. Now, Rhodes is a backwater-ish type of town, for sure. And the main thing that Rhodes had kind of going on story-wise was the 2 giant families that were fighting between each other because they didn't get along, and ultimately both of them ended up crashing and burning by the end of the game, or rather by the end of the chapter and the time that we spent near the area that, you know, Rhodes takes place in. I am also not a fan of Rhodes in terms of actual, like, things you can do in Rhodes. You've probably got, like, what, a saloon. So, I mean, at least you can play blackjack. I feel like that's nice. So if nothing else, you know, you got blackjack. What else have you got? Can't really think of too much more, because I feel like I run through Rhodes a lot, but I don't do much in it activity wise, or even spend much time into it. So I feel like it just kind of goes in and out of my consciousness without me thinking too much about it. So I think that just kind of explains exactly why I'm with Rhodes. It's a fairly mid town, because at least it's not as bad as like Van Horn and Annesberg, where there actively are just places that I don't want to be in at all. And while I might not be a fan of Rhodes, I do pass through it, and it's not like I want to actively avoid the location. I feel like I'm not really going to be putting anything under boring, if I'm being completely honest, because I feel like I do have things to say about certain locations, but boring and mid just feel like they kind of are in the same space, so to speak. Tumbleweed. It's a dead place. There's very little reason to visit. It's in the middle of middle of the desert. I kind of don't actually have anything positive to say about it. I'm just going to put it in bad and just kind of leave it at that, to be completely honest. Saint Denis. Oh, that's an easy one. That's an easy one. Bad. Because pretty much I hate Lemoyne because of Saint Denis. Saint Denis is pretty much an industrial town. And like I said, I'd like the nature, picturesque locations in games like Strawberry. And what is the absolute antithesis of Strawberry is Saint Denis, pretty much, in my opinion. I do not like the industrial nature of Saint Denis because it's just not nice to look at, if I'm being completely honest. Because it reminds me of every major city center. Because like if I go to like downtown here, I'm probably going to see a bunch of homeless people probably taking a piss or dump in like each and every corner. It just doesn't feel clean. The industrialistic nature doesn't help the nature around it, and there barely is any. When it rains, it's mostly puddles and dirt around rather than any sort of, again, nice to look at picturesque locations or a place that I personally would ever want to live. And when you've got more people living in a crowded area, like there are probably more people living in Saint Denis than any of these other locations, maybe equivalent to that of Blackwater, but even so, when you have more people living in a location, people are more likely to steal from you, do other stuff like that. So it's not a place that I personally, again, would also want to like live in as well. So there are just, bits and pieces about each location that I could talk about. Now, a location, Thieves Landing. Definitely not a place I would ever want to live at, but at least it's got a nice-ish looking location. So I'm putting it at mid because the water is nice to look at. There are some forest and trees nearby. I would never want to live there is going to be a negative. They have a decent saloon with a decent selection of games to play. So at least that's something that they've got going for them. But I think outside of that, there isn't really much more to say. The good is good, but the bad is worse to the point where it just goes mid. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember Lagras. I don't know why I don't remember this place. So I'm just gonna put it at boring because I just don't remember. I'll just write this and go, don't remember. I do not remember Lagras for some reason, because the rest of these locations I do in fact remember. So we'll just kind of jump back into it with Emerald Ranch. This is gonna go into chill. I actually do kind of like Emerald Ranch because it's small, you kind of basically know everyone, and it's just a few small plots of land for people to do farming, small houses, this is, I think, modest living at its best. If strawberry is a little bit too expensive, I think Emerald Ranch makes for a good second. If I'm being completely honest, I do like the nature surrounding Emerald Ranch, the sweat and make your own money when it comes to the plots of land, farming possibilities here as well. But also it is a fairly basic location. There is a train station actually nearby. Just if you take the north exit of Emerald Ranch and you follow that path for about not even a minute on your horse, you'll get to a train station as well. So you can basically visit a lot of different locations. So that's kind of cool as well. But outside of that, I don't really have much more to mention. Emerald Ranch is just a strong second behind Strawberry in terms of locations that I absolutely love about the game. MacFarlane's Ranch. Now, this is an interesting one. I think I would put this under chill, only because MacFarlane's Ranch is a nice place, but also the relationships that you build with the characters like Bonnie MacFarlane and her dad during the first game. I think that if we didn't know the MacFarlanes well at all, I probably would have put this under mid. But the relationship between the characters in Red Dead 1 actually up it a little bit, because you can pass through at any time, talk to the folks, have a good time. Staying in the place is also not that bad. The only, I think, thing to worry about, and again, Red Dead 1 does go into this, is the possibility of getting hit with bandits every now and again, which might be the only reason why I was hesitant to put it under chill. Otherwise, not gonna lie, definitely a place that I would have liked to have lived, if I'm being completely honest. And then we're left with Valentine, which I'm gonna put at a mid. I'm not a fan of Valentine. I don't hate it as much as Van Horn, Annesberg, Tumbleweed, or Saint Denis especially. But it is definitely not a chill location like Emerald Ranch or MacFarlane Ranch. I think with Valentine especially, it's just like a standard town, just slightly smaller than a place like... I'd probably say it's about the size of Annesberg, if not... It's definitely smaller than Saint Denis. But yeah, it's again just a smaller town. It's got main roads of everyone passing through it. It seems to have a sizable, probably the third most populated location compared to like Saint Denis and actually, you know, it's smaller than that. But it certainly is a place that I feel like gets hit with a lot of crime, which is a negative. A positive is that it's a small location. And I think it's otherwise fairly standard and comparable to that of Rhodes and Armadillo in that exact same way. Because it doesn't have... While it's surrounded by some nice locations like Thieves Landing, it just isn't the same as like the stuff that's on S and Chill especially. So I can't say that I could compare those with Valentine. So, in the end... Lagras I actually don't remember at all, so I wasn't able to rank that one properly. The ones under bad, Van Horn, Annesberg, Tumbleweed, and Saint Denis, are either largely due to Van Horn, me not wanting to ever go back there, because it seems like a dirty, ruddy-ass place. Annesberg, because it's a mining town, and I'm not a fan of that at all. Tumbleweed, because it's usually pretty dead for the most part, but also it's in the middle of a desert, and it's not an appealing location to be at, or to look around in especially. Saint Denis, the massively populated area that is an industrial town. Definitely not a fan of the industrial aspect of it. Then we've got mid, we've got Armadillo, again fairly standard pH neutral town. Small, but many main roads, and largely due to bandits that I would never want to live there, nor actually spend too much time near. Blackwater, a fairly larger town that, while it could kind of be nice to live in, possibly. The only saving grace it's got is the fact that there's a massive lake on the side. Rhodes, another fairly neutral town comparable to Armadillo in exactly the same way. There isn't much to do. It's a relatively, medium-sized town. And really the only interesting aspect to it are the two warring families in this town. Then you've got Thieves Landing, which again has not a place I would want to live, being the negative, but the positive being, hey look, there's a massive lake. Valentine again is also comparable to that of Rhodes and Armadillo in that exact same way, while Thieves Landing and Blackwater are comparable to each other. Chill is just Emerald Ranch and MacFarlane Ranch, and I think maybe at some point I might want to buy a plot of land and become a farmer one day when I actually grow old and want to retire. But if I want to retire anywhere and I want to live in an incredibly chill location, then let there be no other place than the king of the crop. Strawberry just is such a nice location. It's incredibly picturesque, and I have nothing but positive things to say about it, even though there is a main road that goes through it, but that isn't the biggest deal in the world in my opinion. But with all that being said, however, let me know what you guys think about all of these locations from Red Dead. In your opinion, let me know if I've said something wrong, because I know for a fact that whatever you're going to say is wrong, because this is what I think, and I think correct. Or I think yes. So with all that being said, that's just how the internet is, isn't it? But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 500 subs by the end of the year, and with all that being said, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.